Hey, I'm Ava. I've been wanting to share something for a while. A story about my mother-in-law, Sophia. To put it lightly, our relationship has been complicated from day one. Sophia is, well, let's just say she's a tough person to deal with. She's got these rigid, old-school beliefs that often clashed with my way of doing things. For a while, it wasn't too bad. My husband William and I lived in another city, so interactions with Sophia were limited. But when William got a job near his hometown, things changed. Suddenly, Sophia became a regular fixture in our lives. And let me tell you, it wasn't always pleasant. I've always been good at handling difficult people. Growing up with strict parents prepared me for that. So, when Sophia's passive-aggressive comments started, I gritted my teeth and bore it. Luckily, William's dad, Benjamin, was kind and welcoming, which made things a bit easier. But the real challenge was managing Sophia's relationship with our daughter Luna. Luna, who was 9 at the time, adored her grandparents. She didn't have any contact with my side of the family, so William's parents were the only extended family she knew. Even though Sophia and I had our differences, I never let it get in the way of Luna's bond with her grandparents. Family was important to William, and I wanted Luna to have those connections. But balancing that relationship wasn't easy. Sophia constantly crossed boundaries, especially when it came to Luna's health. You see, Luna has a severe nut allergy. Even the scent of nuts can trigger a reaction. We've always been cautious about her diet, and her doctor assured us that it was under control. But Sophia? She wasn't convinced. Sophia couldn't seem to accept Luna's allergy. She believed that I was being overprotective and dramatic. One time she pulled me aside and said, "You're not feeding Luna right. She's not getting enough protein without nuts in her diet. You're babying her too much." I took a deep breath and calmly reminded her, "Sophia, Luna's allergy is real. It's not something she'll just get over. Her doctor says her meals are balanced, and skipping nuts isn't hurting her." But Sophia wasn't having it. "Back in my day," she said with a huff, "we didn't have all these fancy allergies. Kids built tolerance over time. You're making her weak." It made my blood boil, but I kept my cool for Luna's sake. I didn't want her to see us arguing, but Sophia kept pushing, insisting that exposing Luna to nuts would help her grow out of the allergy. I couldn't believe she was saying this after hearing our doctor's warnings over and over. Things took a darker turn when Sophia started testing boundaries. Once, I caught her slipping a granola bar into Luna's backpack. My heart sank when I saw the packaging. It had almonds in it. I confronted her right away. "Sophia, what are you doing? That could have sent Luna to the hospital." She just rolled her eyes. "It's just a granola bar. She needs to build tolerance. You're overreacting." At that moment, I realized I couldn't leave Luna alone with Sophia anymore. I brought it up with William that night. "William, I'm seriously worried about your mom. She's ignoring Luna's allergy. What if she gives her something dangerous when I'm not there?" He sighed and rubbed his temples. "Ava, you know how she is. My mom has strong opinions, but she wouldn't actually put Luna in danger." I shook my head. "She already did. I found a granola bar with almonds in Luna's bag. What if Luna had eaten it?" "You can't brush this off," William tried to reassure me. "Don't worry so much. My dad is always there to keep things in check. And Luna loves spending time with them. We can't just cut them out." I wanted to believe him, but deep down, I knew Sophia wasn't going to back off that easily. Her stubbornness ran deep, and honestly, William was in denial. He didn't want to admit that his mom could be reckless with our daughter's safety. I decided to stay vigilant. As long as I was around, I could make sure Sophia didn't pull any stunts. But I couldn't be with Luna 24/7. And unfortunately, my worst fears were about to come true. I should have trusted my gut. Sophia wasn't just stubborn, she was relentless. The breaking point came at Luna's 11th birthday party. William and I planned a small gathering at our house with a few of Luna's friends. Nothing fancy, just pizza, cake, and presents. Luna was excited, and honestly, so was I. After all, there's nothing better than seeing your kid happy on their birthday. We invited Benjamin and Sophia, of course. Despite our issues, they were still Luna's grandparents. Benjamin was thrilled to come, but Sophia's enthusiasm felt off. She wasn't the type to get excited about spending time with me, yet she called 3 times that week, asking about the party details. "I've got a special gift for Luna," she kept saying. "Something she'll love." It gave me a weird feeling, but I brushed it off. Maybe she was just trying to be a good grandma for once. On the day of the party, Sophia and Benjamin showed up early. That alone was unusual. Sophia never arrived early for anything. She walked in with this huge box, wrapped in bright paper, and practically shoved it into Luna's arms. "Happy birthday, sweetie. Grandma got you something really special," she said, beaming. Luna's face lit up. "Wow, Grandma! It's huge. Can I open it now?" Before I could answer, Sophia chimed in. "Yes, open it now. It's meant to be opened before the cake." That set off alarm bells in my head. Why was she so insistent? Normally, we opened presents after the cake. I tried to play it cool. "Let's wait until all your friends get here, Luna. We'll do presents after we cut the cake, okay?" But Sophia wouldn't let it go. No, this one has to be opened now. Trust me, it'll make her birthday extra special." Luna looked at me with those hopeful eyes. I didn't want to ruin her excitement, so I gave in. "Okay, just this one." She tore into the wrapping paper like any excited kid would, revealing a fancy-looking box underneath. She opened it and gasped, "It's a cake with my name on it!" For a moment, everything seemed fine. Luna looked thrilled, but then her smile faded, her hands started shaking, her face turned pale, and then she collapsed. Time froze for a second. I watched Luna hit the floor, and for a moment, my brain couldn't process what was happening. Then it hit me, her allergy. "Luna!" I screamed, rushing to her side. Her face was swelling fast, and her breathing was shallow. My heart pounded in my chest as I fumbled for the epinephrine pen I always kept nearby. William was already on his feet shouting, "Someone call 911!" I jabbed the pen into Luna's thigh, praying it would work fast. Her swelling eased a little, but she still wasn't waking up. The room felt like it was spinning. I turned to Sophia, rage and panic boiling over. "What did you put in that cake?" Sophia blinked, wide-eyed, like she had no clue what I was talking about. "It's just a regular cake. I thought she'd love it. Maybe it's something else that caused this." "Don't play dumb, Sophia. You know she's allergic to nuts. Did you put nuts in that cake?" She folded her arms, looking defensive. "Well, yes, there are some nuts in it, but it's healthy. Kids need nuts to build tolerance." I was trying to help her. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you out of your mind? You knew she was allergic. You knew it could kill her, and you gave it to her anyway?" "I didn't think it would be this serious," she muttered, looking away. I felt my whole body shaking with fury. Benjamin, who had been standing quietly until now, stepped forward and stared at his wife like he didn't recognize her. "Sophia, what the hell have you done?" Before anyone could say more, the paramedics burst through the door. They quickly assessed Luna and loaded her onto a stretcher. William and I followed them to the ambulance, leaving Benjamin and Sophia behind in stunned silence. The ride to the hospital felt endless. I held Luna's hand the whole time, whispering, "Stay with me, baby. You're going to be okay." But inside, I was terrified. When we got to the hospital, the doctors took over. They assured us that Luna was stable, but would need to stay for observation. I sat by her bed, stroking her hair and trying to hold back tears. William was pacing the room, his hands running through his hair. "I can't believe this happened. I never thought my mom would actually—" "Believe it," I said coldly. "Your mom put our daughter's life in danger because she thought she knew better. I'm done making excuses for her." He nodded slowly, his face hardening with resolve. "You're right. This is it. She's gone too far." For the first time, I saw the guilt in his eyes. He had always defended his mom, believing she had good intentions, but now he realized she was a danger to our family. We sat in silence, waiting for Luna to wake up. But in my mind, I was already planning my next move. There was no way I was letting Sophia near my daughter ever again. The next day, Luna finally woke up. Her eyes fluttered open, and for a second she looked confused. Then her little hand reached for mine, and I felt like I could breathe again. "Mom?" Her voice was weak, but hearing it brought tears to my eyes. "I'm right here, baby. You're safe. Everything's okay now." She looked around the hospital room, frowning. "What happened? Why am I here?" William sat beside me and gently explained. "You had an allergic reaction, sweetheart, but the doctors took care of you. You're going to be just fine." Then her face scrunched up and she whispered, "Grandma gave me the cake. Did it have nuts in it?" I felt a lump in my throat. I didn't want to upset her, but I couldn't lie. "Yes, it did, but don't worry. She's not going to hurt you again." Luna's eyes filled with tears. "I don't want to see Grandma anymore. She always says weird stuff about my food, and she tried to make me eat things I don't like." Hearing that broke my heart. Sophia hadn't just crossed a line once. This had been building up for a while. Luna had been uncomfortable around her, and I hadn't realized how bad it was. I squeezed her hand. "You won't have to see her again, I promise." Once Luna was stable enough to rest, William and I left the room to talk. "She's scared of my mom," William said quietly, staring at the floor. I nodded. "I'm scared too. She could have killed Luna. And the worst part is, she doesn't even feel sorry. She thinks she was helping." William's jaw clenched. "I'm done with her. We need to make sure she can't get near our family again." I could see how much this hurt him. He loved his mom, but he loved Luna more. When we got home that night, we found Benjamin waiting for us. Sophia was nowhere in sight. "How's Luna?" Benjamin asked, his voice full of concern. "She's going to be okay," I said, "but she's scared. She doesn't want to see Sophia again." Benjamin nodded slowly. "I don't blame her. I had no idea Sophia would do something so reckless. I've been trying to talk sense into her for years, but this is unforgivable." William sighed heavily. "Dad, it's time to set some boundaries. Mom can't be part of our lives anymore." Benjamin looked down, sadness etched into his face. "I know. I've been thinking about that too. She won't listen to me, and she won't change. I don't want her hurting anyone else." Then he surprised me by saying, "I'm filing for divorce." My eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "I've had enough," he said firmly. "She's been stubborn and controlling for too long. But putting Luna in danger? That's the last straw." Hearing that felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. For the first time, I felt like we had real allies in this fight. But things weren't over yet. Sophia wasn't going to go quietly. We thought Sophia would back off after what happened, but we underestimated just how stubborn she really was. A few days after we got home from the hospital, we heard a knock at the door. I opened it to find Sophia standing there with a smug expression, holding a stack of papers in her hand. "I'm here to talk," she said, as if nothing had happened. I stood in the doorway, blocking her from coming inside. "There's nothing to talk about, Sophia. You almost killed Luna. You're not welcome here." She narrowed her eyes and thrust the papers toward me. "These are my rights as a grandmother. I'm going to court to make sure I can see my granddaughter." I couldn't believe it. "Are you serious right now? You gave her a cake with nuts, knowing she could have a deadly reaction. And now you want to force your way into her life?" Sophia crossed her arms. "I was trying to help her. You're the one who's overreacting. Kids outgrow allergies all the time." I was done listening to her nonsense. "You're not a doctor, Sophia. You're not Luna's parent. And after what you did, you won't be seeing her again. Ever." William came to the door and stood beside me. His face was hard, his jaw clenched. "Mom, leave. You've crossed too many lines. We're done." Sophia's expression faltered for a moment, but then she sneered. "I knew you'd take her side. She's poisoned you against me." "No," William said firmly. "You did this to yourself. You've been controlling and manipulative my whole life. But this, putting Luna in danger, there's no coming back from that." Behind Sophia, Benjamin pulled up in his car. He stepped out and walked up the driveway, his eyes fixed on his wife. "Sophia, "It's time to stop," he said quietly. "You're making this worse." She spun around to face him. "You're supposed to be on my side." "I can't support you when you've hurt our family," Benjamin said. "I've filed for divorce. It's over." The look on Sophia's face was one of pure shock. For a moment, she just stood there, speechless. Then she turned back to me, her face twisted with anger. "This isn't over," she hissed. "I'll fight you in court. You can't keep me away from Luna." I shook my head. "You won't win. You put her life at risk. That's not something a judge will ignore." Sophia stormed off, muttering under her breath. I watched her go, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. It was hard to watch someone self-destruct like that, but we had to protect Luna. In the months that followed, everything changed. Sophia tried to follow through on her threat to go to court, but it didn't get far. The police report, hospital records, and Benjamin's testimony made it clear she was a danger to Luna. Her case was dismissed, and we got a restraining order to keep her away from us. Benjamin finalized the divorce. He started coming over more often to spend time with Luna, and their bond grew stronger. Luna went to therapy to process what happened. It took time, but she started to heal. She no longer had nightmares about her grandmother, and she felt safe again. William and I also went to therapy together. We worked through the guilt, the fear, and the tension that Sophia had caused. One evening, as we sat together watching Luna play with Benjamin, William took my hand. "I'm sorry it took me so long to see it," he said softly. "I should have protected you both sooner." I squeezed his hand. "We did what we had to do. And now, we're stronger for it. Life isn't perfect, but it's peaceful now." Sophia? She faded into the background. No one wanted to deal with her anymore, not friends, not family. She became a cautionary tale of what happens when you let pride and control take over your life. But for us, it was a new beginning. We built our lives back up piece by piece, with one promise guiding us. Luna's safety and happiness would always come first, and that's a promise we'll never break. Story 2. My beloved son Ryan passed away, and we are saying our final goodbyes to him today. My husband Mike didn't even attend his funeral, which makes my heart hurt even more. I called him, heartbroken and frustrated. In stark contrast to my sorrow, his voice on the other end of the line was upbeat. Unaware of the pain in my voice, he said, "I'm in Hawaii for my parents' 70th anniversary." My mother was shocked when I told her, but her surprise soon gave way to rage. "What? Is that in Hawaii?" Without hesitation, she decided to confront Mike and his parents after explaining, her face turning red. "I work in an office and am Emily, 40 years old. After 10 years of marriage, Mike and I have a son named Ryan. Ryan has been battling leukemia for the past 2 years, which has kept him in the hospital even though he missed the majority of his early school years. He would be delighted to have his classmates visit him. We were all inspired by Ryan's tenacity, and I found strength in his resolve. My parents visited Ryan every day and were there for him no matter what. My mother used to say that she eagerly anticipated the day when Ryan would be able to eat his favorite foods once more. My dad, though diagnosed with dementia a few years ago, also made frequent visits one day, mistaking me for a nurse. He said thank you for taking care of my grandson. His words were bittersweet, though his memory of me faltered. His concern for Ryan remained unwavering. Ryan, wise beyond his years, understood his grandpa's condition and would kindly play along whenever my dad said something odd. Their bond was heartwarming, a sharp contrast to Ryan's relationship with his father. "Can't you visit Ryan?" "Sometimes." "Don't you care about what he's going through?" I once asked Mike, desperate for his support. His response crushed me. "Ryan doesn't like me, so it's better if I stay away. Besides, I'm really busy." It was true that Ryan and Mike didn't get along. Mike had never been involved in Ryan's care, not even when he was a baby. Ryan, understandably, grew distant from his father. Whenever Mike had free time, he chose to spend it with his own parents, who also showed little interest in their grandson's health. "How can he be so heartless?" my mom said, her frustration evident. "And his parents? Did they not care about Ryan at all?" I replied half-jokingly. "Maybe I married the wrong person." I had fallen for Mike's kindness when we were dating, but he had become cold and indifferent to both me and Ryan. If I'd known he was like this, I would never have introduced him to you, my mom said, regret coloring her voice. Mike and I had met through my uncle, who was friends with Mike's father. At the time, I wasn't seeing anyone, so I agreed to meet Mike. He seemed kind and we hit it off. Before I knew it, we were dating seriously and eventually got married. But things changed after the wedding. Mike's parents, who had been warm and welcoming before, became controlling. My mother-in-law, who once greeted me with smiles, turned harsh. You're part of this family now, Emily, and you'll do as I say. If not, we'll ensure you get a proper divorce. She once told me coldly, as I sit here now grieving for Ryan. I can't help but wonder if I made a mistake trusting Mike and his family. I initially thought my father-in-law was a quiet man, but over time his true colors began to show. He often made insulting remarks, saying things like, "We only let you marry Mike because the head of our family introduced you. Otherwise, there's no way we would have let someone like you marry our son." At first, I didn't understand his disdain. My uncle, who runs a real estate company, had introduced me to Mike. Apparently during the introduction, my uncle mentioned that I came from a wealthy family. This led my father-in-law to assume that my father owned substantial properties. That assumption fueled his condescending attitude. I hadn't heard any of this from my father or uncle, so I initially believed my father-in-law's comments. After Mike and I got married, we moved into the house where my maternal grandparents had lived. They had passed away, and the house had been empty for some time. My parents planned to rent it out to prevent it from deteriorating, but when Mike found out about the house, he pleaded with my parents. "I promise we'll take good care of it, so please let us live there," he said. "It's close to her family too, so we can help look after them." The arrangement made sense. The house was near both our families, which would allow us to keep an eye on our parents. However, having Mike's parents so close quickly became a burden. Mike would often invite his parents over and start bragging, saying things like, "Our house is so new, you must be jealous. It's so much bigger, maybe even twice the size of yours." While his father seemed irritated by the bragging, his mother would smile and say, "We could live here together. It might be old, but it's better than our place." After one such visit, I asked Mike directly, "Are you planning to have your parents move in with us? This isn't even your house." He brushed it off, stating it was only a joke, but his mother's actions suggested otherwise. Not long after, his parents began coming often, examining the house as if they were planning to move in. Living here would be better than our poor abode. My father-in-law grumbled, "One day, at least there's no rent in this dump." I was outraged when he termed the place a dump, but my mother-in-law's actions were much worse. She disregarded me entirely while selecting out a place for herself. When Mike didn't speak out, I determined to put the record straight. "We're borrowing this house from my folks. My grandparents used to live here, so of course it's a bit old." I told my in-laws appeared astonished, but my father-in-law instantly reacted, "That's why it's in such horrible shape." His tone was contemptuous, and I believed the house was considerably superior than where they lived. My mother-in-law, however, accused me of lying. "I trust my son more than you." She stated her incredulity didn't change the facts, so I let the subject rest. I was still uncomfortable, concerned that they would force their way into the house. After I found out I was pregnant, that dread went away. Suddenly, there was no more mention of their moving in. Maybe they understood that living with us would entail assisting with the baby's care. My mother-in-law once told me that since Emily's parents live close by, they need to look after the child. I'm not going to do it. Her remarks hurt even though I hadn't sought for her assistance. How she could be so unconcerned about her first grandchild was difficult to understand. When I mentioned it to my mother, she only chuckled. She said, "Leave the babysitting to me." Someone who doesn't want to look after a cute grandchild doesn't need to be asked. I chose to depend on my parents because she was correct. When my kid was born, my parents were ecstatic at the moment. However, my in-laws were only there once. Mike's response was unimpressive as well. It disappointed me much that he seemed unmoved by the arrival of our baby. In an attempt to soothe me, my mother added, "Don't worry. Mike will feel more like a parent once the child is a bit older." However, Mike lost interest in our child over time. Our son fell when he was 5 years old. The physicians determined that he had pediatric cancer after a number of tests. I was saddened because I thought Mike would help me get over this unthinkable situation. Rather, "You will have to pay for the medical care yourself," he stated icily. "I have no problem with that." His remarks devastated me, and I was left to deal with our son's condition and medical treatment by myself. My husband's behavior as a father infuriated me. His mother's remarks were far more hurtful than his enragement at his lack of sensitivity. "Ryan gets cancer since Emily passed on her genes," she hissed. "It must be her fault because none of our relatives have anything like that." My father quickly defended me after hearing this. "Are you indifferent to Ryan? We will look after him ourselves." With a forceful and protective tone, he responded, "You can do whatever you want." My son's condition was already overwhelming me, but my father's support made my husband and in-laws discreetly depart. Everything was made more difficult by their nasty comments. But I was encouraged by my mother. "Try not to give up. You must be strong for Ryan. We will make every effort to assist you," she reassured me, and with my parents' support, I decided to put all of my attention on my son and stop depending on my spouse. I balanced Ryan's care with my job. I was always thankful to them for their selfless assistance, even though they were retired. At first, Ryan's condition improved despite his diagnosis, and he was able to lead a life that was nearly normal for a youngster. But my spouse didn't think Ryan's sickness was that bad. "Is Ryan truly ill, or are you only attempting to deceive me?" One day, as he watched Ryan play joyfully, he asked. I disregarded his unfounded charges. There was no use in arguing with him. As time went on, my husband retreated to his parents' home and spent less and less time there. He brought nothing except complaints, so it was odd that his disappearance made things easier for me. My parents filled the void by taking turns looking after Ryan. My spouse, meanwhile, appeared to be losing interest in our son's life. Only until Ryan was admitted to the hospital 2 years ago did he start to visit the residence more often. Casually, he would remark, "Leave the housework to me." "By the way, why don't you just give me this house?" he would say, grinning. I chose to disregard his comments, but it was obvious that the property was more important to him than Ryan. Like a threatening cloud, his plans to move live with his parents hung over me. My mother and I were always busy taking care of my father at this period since he had been diagnosed with dementia. My father's illness was unnoticed by my spouse and in-laws. They didn't even appear to notice my father's periodic visits. My spouse casually said, "Your parents were here earlier," one day. "They were only aimlessly strolling. Will they not assist with Ryan?" I was annoyed by his easygoing tone, but I ignored it, too tired to describe. The worsening of my father's dementia. My uncle started coming around more frequently. He often had serious conversations with my mother. My mother simply provided evasive answers when I questioned her about it. I was concerned, but Ryan's condition deteriorated before I could think about it. Even though I had prepared for this, the actuality was too much to handle. My father's health is deteriorating, and my husband is untrustworthy. My mother was my main source of support. I was astonished by my husband's reaction when I told him about Ryan's declining health. "I'm currently really busy. Don't call me anymore." "You deal with Ryan's predicament," he remarked contemptuously. I was driven to my breaking point by his lack of parental responsibilities. I started thinking about breaking up with him. The sadness was severe shortly after Ryan's death. My mother and uncle filled in, making sure that Ryan could be by his side until the very end, because I couldn't bring myself to handle any of the arrangements. Right before the funeral, where Mike and his folks were, my uncle started to freak out. "The funeral cannot be skipped, can it?" His voice rose in exasperation as he spoke. I contacted my hubby when I noticed his worry. "You're where? It's time to bid Ryan farewell." With a quivering voice I spoke. "My parents' anniversary is being celebrated at the party I'm at." He heard his voice and cheerfully replied, "I told you not to call me right now." Angry, my mother's face flushed. She clarified that he was in Hawaii. My uncle, clearly incensed, acted immediately. Even though I knew my husband would take a vacation, rather than attend our son's funeral, I still didn't have high expectations for him. Fury filled me up. You went on a trip even though you knew Ryan was in critical condition. My voice trembled as I spoke. I'm sorry Ryan has a dad like you. I hung up while my mother consoled me, tears running down my cheeks. I'll never be able to forgive them. Do not be concerned. She said cryptically, everything will be gone by the time they return from Hawaii. But I didn't understand what she was saying. I was too tired to ask them questions. With the help of my mother and uncle, the funeral was a success. But after that, I was at a loss. Ryan had taken center stage in my life, and I was at a loss for what to do next. Emily, let me handle the future. Return to your parents' home and relax. I followed my uncle's advice. I went back home and took some time off from work to assist with my father's care. I was relieved that my employer was understanding and gave me a longer break. My husband then gave Emily a call one day. I am unable to enter the house. Have you replaced the locks? It's terrible to change them without warning, he said in a panic. Calmly, I said, I didn't change the locks. But don't call me anymore, because I'm going to break up with you. Shortly after I hung up, he called once more. It's more frantic now. The house where my parents lived was destroyed. A piece of land is up for sale. Register. What's happening? He yelled. I interrupted him by saying, I don't know what you're talking about. Ask my uncle. I asked my uncle, though. He invited me to come see what was going on at my in-laws' house, and he seemed pleased. Intrigued and nervous, I followed directions. My husband and his parents were standing outside, looking completely stunned, when I got there. What does this signify? My dad-in-law made a demand. We lost our house. Is this because you were not taken to Hawaii by us? Did you destroy the house because you were angry? I couldn't understand the charge. That's not something I could ever do. I was busy grieving my son and arranging his funeral. I retorted, frustrated by the absurdity of her claim. Just then, my uncle and mother arrived. My mother's expression was cold and resolute. People who didn't even attend their own grandson's funeral have no right to complain, she said, her voice sharp. You should reflect on your actions. Mike and his parents fell silent, but the silence didn't last. My father-in-law quickly recovered and began ranting. You can't just demolish the house and sell the land. I'm the owner of that property, he shouted, brandishing a document. His declaration made me pause. Could he be suffering from dementia as well? He proudly showed us a contract bearing my father's signature, claiming that my father had transferred the property to him. But the document looked suspicious, hastily done and amateurish. To make matters worse, it stated that the property had been given away for free, an impossibility. This contract isn't valid, I said, my voice steady. And for the record, my father suffers from dementia and cannot make sound decisions. Mike and his parents insisted the contract was legitimate, claiming they were unaware of my father's condition. My father is not the owner of this land, my mother interjected firmly. The property is registered under my name. You must have coerced him into signing this. Her words shocked me, but they clearly unnerved Mike and his family even more. My uncle stepped forward, producing detailed land records and a lease agreement. This land and building both belonged to Emily's mother. You were renting the property from us, he said, his tone stern. You stopped paying rent months ago, ignored our attempts to meet, and left us no choice but to terminate the lease and put the property up for sale. Mike's parents stared at the documents in stunned silence. Were we behind on rent? My father-in-law asked, turning to my mother-in-law. I thought it was fine since we're related to Emily's uncle, he muttered, caught off guard. My mother-in-law confessed. We were planning to trick your father into giving us the land, so we didn't think paying the rent was necessary. Her disclosure left me enraged. They had a plot to use my father's sickness from the very beginning, while I struggled to digest this information. Mike took out another contract, looking remorseful. Is the house we live in also your property? Does this contract mean nothing to? He inquired, his voice tinted with desperation. The document in his hand, just like the first for my father signing. It was evident Mike had constructed a false document, assuming our home belonged to my father as well. How foolish, my mother replied, shaking her head. You tried to mislead us without even establishing who owned the land. It's ludicrous." Mike and his parents were there shivering with fury and embarrassment. Just then, a young woman stepped from behind a neighboring building. "When will you pay me back for the trip expenditures I covered? And what about the life insurance payout from your son?" she asked. Mike was clearly in a panic when she appeared. My uncle grinned. "You brought your mistress to Hawaii even after your kid passed away. You really aren't ashamed," he remarked. "We've looked at everything." After a moment of shock, I recognized the lady as Mike's mistress. Since she had entered a combustible environment, my uncle must have surreptitiously investigated his suspicions about Mike's adultery. The mistress quickly ran away. "I didn't thought you were capable of such lowness," I told Mike. "Heaven must be horrified by our son." Mike followed her without hesitation, leaving his parents to deal with the consequences. "How does it feel to have had a good time in Hawaii while using the funds from my son's life insurance?" I inquired icily. "Regretfully, I am the one who benefits. Mel, you'll be responsible for covering the cost of your lavish vacation. Return." Following the funeral, Mike's parents departed right away. My mother's intention to cut Mike and his family out of our life became clear to me. I requested alimony when I filed for divorce. As it came out, Mike had been unfaithful to me for 2 years and had intended to leave me after our kid passed away in order to take advantage of the life insurance payment and escape obligations like child support. Mike had even taken advantage of my father's dementia to force him to sign a false contract while my mother and I were distracted with Ryan's condition. But he had been unaware that my mother, not my father, owned the land. Ultimately, Mike and his parents accumulated enormous debt. Mike was required to pay alimony and pay for their Hawaii vacation. He was left alone and drowning in financial disaster after his mistress left him. I started to get over the loss of my son once I was back at my family's house. I took comfort in thinking that Ryan was keeping an eye on us as my mother and I continued to take care of my father. My father stated something surprising one day. "Ryan is coming to visit." Though surprised, he whispered that he was running about joyfully. I made the decision to think that my son's spirit was close by, urging us to live bravely and optimistically for his sake. I promised to keep going. Story 3. You had to be the one, but why? The quiet of the living room was broken by Mother's harsh voice as she stared at my stomach. I froze, unable to speak. Moran is my name, a homemaker of 25 years old. My mother has always loved my older sister, Tara, who is 3 years older than me. I yearned for my mother's approval for years. When I found out I was expecting a child, I ventured to think that we may reconcile after learning of her first grandchild. Warner, my husband, and I went to my parents' house that day to make the announcement. The first person to meet us was Tara. She smiled as warmly as ever. "Moran." She pulled me into an embrace and remarked, "It's been so long." Tara told me that although Father was out at work, he would be back shortly. When Mother showed up, she clenched her face when she saw me. However, as soon as she realized, she immediately covered it with a grin. "Warner, my goodness, for your visit. I have nothing ready." She retreated to the kitchen and whispered, "Just a moment." She came back a few minutes later carrying a tray of cookies that she had prepared herself. She knew I didn't like them since they were loaded with sugar. Yes, exactly. Doesn't Moran dislike sweets? Her eyes shifted to Warner as she spoke with heightened worry. "I apologize." "Who?" Warner asked with a kind grin. "It's more important what I eat than what I consume." Mother's answer was blunt. She sat down on the couch, her eyes still wary, as I can tell. Now that everyone was seated, I inhaled deeply. "We have something significant to discuss, which is why we came here today." My voice faltered a little. I persisted despite Mother's piercing gaze. "I am actually expecting a child." The room was completely quiet for a while. Then, with a cheerful smile, Tara shattered it. "Moran." She threw her arms around me and shouted, "Congratulations!" But her mother's face clouded. Tara and Mother went to the kitchen to prepare tea when Warner excused himself to answer a work call. The room grew oppressively tense. Her mask fell off entirely. "You had to be the one, but why?" She trembled with repressed anger as she spoke. I started to reply, but she interrupted me. Tara should have been the first grandchild. Someone similar to you? She jumped up suddenly and gave me a strong kick to the gut before I could comprehend what she had said. With a scream escaping my mouth, I fell to the ground in agony. "Stop, Mom!" From the threshold of the kitchen came Tara's shriek of horror. Warner rushed back into the room and she raced to me. His expression was one of shock and rage. He knelt next to me and yelled, "Moran!" as I shivered and curled in. Warner shielded me as Tara picked up her phone and dialed an ambulance. "What are you doing?" The dresser was struck by her. With a dismissive wave of her hand, Mother spoke calmly, but Tara's voice broke out in rage. "I saw you, Mom." As the ambulance sirens became louder, you kicked her in the stomach. In and out of awareness, I wandered, Warner said as he squeezed my hand. "It's all right. I'm present." While screaming and holding her mother, Tara was crying. What if the infant suffers an injury? Paramedics showed up. As they hoisted me onto the stretcher, their voices were demanding and urgent. Mother's icy gaze pierced me, a focused expression of the contempt she had instilled in me throughout my life. Tara was in the ambulance with me, clutching my hand. She repeatedly apologized. "I'm so sorry." She was crying uncontrollably. I should have recognized earlier. I had a twinge of appreciation for my sister in spite of my suffering. As the ambulance raced toward the hospital, her love and warmth had remained unwavering, despite her mother's lack of concern. Streetlights flashed across my field of vision. My thoughts turned to my early years, when my mother's treatment of Tara and me differed greatly. I was unable to identify the exact time, but I was certain that Tara's reflection of Mother, the town's previous beauty queen, had always delighted her. The compliment of every neighbor, "Are you not Patricia's daughter?" seemed to give her a proud glow. However, I had constantly disappointed her with my father-like traits. Later that night, while I lay in a hospital bed, I made up my mind. This unhealthy connection with Mother needed to cease, for the benefit of both myself and my child. I can very clearly recall a Christmas morning when Tara was 11 and I was 8. Beautifully wrapped gifts were piled beneath the tree, which was decked up with glittering lights. Tara was the first to unwrap her present, a stylish garment from a well-known brand. Mother smiled proudly. "It is ideal for Tara." "After all, she's my daughter," she continued, her voice brimming with love. I excitedly ripped the box's covering off when it was my turn. I discovered a t-shirt and a pair of basic pants inside that I had probably bought on discount at Walmart. "These fit you better, Moran," Mom said nonchalantly. I was too young to know how to react. I simply swallowed the lump that was growing in my throat and nodded. The clothing weren't the only thing at stake. The disparities were noticeable even at mealtimes. Mother would encourage Tara to eat more by piling extra amounts onto her plate. "Why don't you eat more?" Presenting her baked sweets. In the meantime, she would limit my portion, stating, "Moran, that should be sufficient if you wish to keep that number, don't you think?" The distance between us expanded as we aged. Tara became the cheering squad's captain after developing into a well-liked and self-assured adolescent. With pride, Mother took several photos at all of her weekend games. However, in spite of my good timings and strong performance, I joined the track team. Mother never showed up to observe. "I'm occupied." Was she always making excuses? Father King would sometimes give me a simple, "You performed well," but he appeared unaware of the intricacies of our family dynamic in high school since he was too busy working. I started to understand that my circumstances weren't Mama's. The pivotal moment occurred while I was speaking with Serena Moran, my best friend. One day she stated, "Your mother is just too cruel." Startled, I blinked. "What are you saying? Does she purchase high-end clothing for Tara?" "However," Serena paused, her words faltering, "that is not how my mother would ever treat her children." My eyes were awakened by her remarks. I had never looked at my family through that perspective before, and it hurt to hear the truth. Tara, however, was not aware of the difference. She really did believe. "I liked my outfit simpler. You have such a nice figure, Moran. You look fantastic in whatever." Tara would frequently remark this while grinning. She even occasionally offered to let me use her clothing, although they were rarely appropriate. When no one else was there, Mother's care deteriorated. Her remarks became piercing and savage with her. The idea that I would have to have a child like you, Tara, would have sufficed. Why are you unable to emulate her? My self-esteem was ripped apart by her charges. However, I learned to suppress my emotions since I knew that expressing my anguish would only make her more nasty. My friends saw how much of a toll that had on me. Serena and a few others threw me a surprise party on my 6th birthday. That year, my mother didn't give me anything, but I still appreciate the tiny makeup item that my friends got me. Around that time, I made the decision to move out. After high school, I was resolved to start my own life. With only a high school degree, Mother's final remarks were a scoff. You will never be anything. Her disdain, however, just strengthened my determination. Tara proudly used the family's funds to pay for her tuition while attending college with her mother. As if to defend the cost, she continued, "It's worth it for Tara." I had never received any such payments, but oddly, the unfairness only strengthened me. I worked part-time at a nearby diner and concentrated on keeping up my good scores. I created a strategy for the future and increased my savings with every paycheck. In my hospital bed, lying down, I can now relive those recollections as if they were movie sequences. I know I'm safe because of the monitor's constant beep. The doctor reassured me that my child was safe and no longer the defenseless girl I had pledged to be that day. I would never treat my child the way my mother treated me, I thought, as I lay there looking up at the nighttime sky. Warner showed up early on my 2nd morning in the hospital when I inquired whether work was going okay. With a kind grin, he answered, "You're more important." 3 years after high school graduation, I got to know Warner. Mother had sneered just after she left the house. "You'll return in due time." However, I never came back. Tara appeared unconcerned about my leaving since she was preoccupied with her college life. It was difficult to begin. While seeking for clerical jobs at large grocery chains, I kept working at the diner. The interviewers' faces were often clouded with uncertainty when I brought up the fact that I didn't have a college degree. I couldn't remember how many times I was turned down, above 30. The pivotal moment occurred during a customer service interview at an egg manufacturer. "We respect your passion and experience more than your education," the HR manager stated. My life was revolutionized by those words. I met Warner, a systems engineer, when I got my first office job at a small business. We initially spoke about a printer that was stuck. "You consistently arrive early and remain late." One day Warner watched, his tongue warm and interested. My response was straightforward. "I want to study as much as I can for someone who has just completed high school. This position is a unique one." Warner began visiting my desk frequently after that day. We started spending weekends together after chatting over coffee during breaks. I gained the confidence to open up about my difficulties as we became closer. My tense relationship with Mother, Tara's partiality, and my father's subdued apathy. I was afraid that if I opened up, he would go. Warner, however, was unique. He held me close and stated, "No one has the right to deny your worth." I felt secure enough to cry uncontrollably for the first time. In the winter of my 2nd year at the firm, Warner proposed. We walked through neighborhoods lit up with lights after the corporate Christmas party. Abruptly, he dropped to one knee and said, "Will you marry me?" In a straightforward but sincere way. Without hesitation, I answered sure. When I came home to announce our engagement, it had been 2 years since I had left home. Mother's response was expected. First cold. She sneered that no respectable guy would wed a lady who had just completed high school. Her attitude, however, changed significantly when she discovered that Warner was a systems engineer. "Am I an engineer?" she shouted, and I felt uneasy about her abrupt shift in attitude and fake friendliness. Warner responded calmly and honestly, handling her shallow actions with grace. On the other side, Tara was truly overjoyed. "I'm so happy for you, Moran," she added, smiling broadly as she gave you a hug and offered to assist with the wedding planning. Even his normally aloof father gave his uncommon endorsement, stating that he is a decent young man. We had a small, yet meaningful wedding. At the reception, Mother couldn't help but whisper in my ear while maintaining a fake grin. This is not going to last. I could no longer be harmed by her remarks. It was an epiphany in my new existence. I was greeted warmly by Warner's parents, who treated me like their own daughter. During the early stages of our marriage, my mother-in-law provided me with kind guidance. She would reply, "Your cooking is delicious." She gave sincere and nice praise. I was still doing well at work. My high school degree was no longer a barrier because of my expertise in customer service, which led to a new position training staff. I found out I was pregnant a year after we were married. Warner was instantly elated. "Wow," he said, leaping to his feet. He excitedly informed his parents of the news. They were ecstatic and threw us advice and baby brochures. I was hesitant to inform my own family, even though they were thrilled. I was certain that Mom would somehow sabotage the occasion. Still, a little part of me clung to hope. "I'm hoping this baby will help us overcome our differences." Warner gave me encouragement. "I'll accompany you." We told Tara in advance and decided on a date. Now, that day seems like a bad dream. The subtle scent of the flower Warner brought permeates the room as a light on his hospital bed. His hushed words, "Now it's our turn," have a profound impact. I have our kid, Warner, in spite of all I know, and a joy that no one can rob me of. My thoughts are interrupted by a knock at the door. "It's time for rounds, ma'am." Gently, the nurse says, bringing me back to the present. There is no going back, yet the decisions that lie ahead will be difficult. I keep thinking about what the doctor said earlier. The fetus is undamaged despite a little fracture. When he uttered that, a wave of relief swept over the room. Warner nodded, and Tara squeezed my hand. His expression darkened. Our sense of relief was fleeting. Father and Mother Moran came in as the door opened. "Papa," he murmured in a distressed tone. "Tara gave us a call. Is it accurate?" With a protective tongue, Mother interrupted him. "What are you discussing?" Just now, Moran dashed into the dresser. "That's all." Tara sprang to her feet, her voice shaking with rage. "Mom, that's enough. I witnessed it. You kicked Moran in the gut, and I witnessed it." The father's face lost its color. "It isn't possible." Prior to his saying anything else, a social worker was standing at the door when there was another knock. "Could I talk to you?" Her presence exuded authority, despite the calmness of her words. Mother fell to the ground, tears running down her cheeks. "They're making me the bad guy. Everyone is working together against me." She screamed, but her performance didn't affect anyone. The social worker didn't lose her cool. "Given that the victim is pregnant, this is unquestionably a violent case. It will be handled with seriousness." Mother was frozen in her tracks by her words. The social worker went on, "I can call the police and report this. But first, if you want to talk about this as a family." The tension was broken by Tara's voice. "Let's tell them everything now, Moran." I inhaled deeply. "Yes," I said softly. "The days of hiding are over." It was time to face up to the years of abuse I had received from my mother. Despite the weight of 25 years pressing down on my chest, I started talking. "Dad." With a quivering voice, I spoke. "This is what I've been going through all along, individually." I explained everything. The partiality, the harsh remarks, the way my mother would treat me while showing Tara love. Her behavior completely changed when there were no other people around, I can speculate. Trembling with remorse, Moran's father's voice cracked as he spoke. "Why didn't you inform me earlier? I was unable to." I dabbed at the tears streaming down my face. "When you and Tara were around, she always behaved like a wonderful mother." No one would believe me, I reasoned. Tara, seated close by, put her hands over her face. She cried, "I'm so sorry, Moran." I didn't notice. Mother rose up suddenly before I could reply, her voice abrasive and defensive. "Am I to blame?" She spat. She was unattractive and unhelpful. Like me, Tara had ability and beauty. Father interrupted her outburst with a thunderous voice that was normally so quiet. "Enough," he firmly stated. "You're not suited to be a mom. I will no longer allow you to harm Moran." The social worker in attendance talked in a calm manner. "I suggest therapy and a restraining order in this case." Anger distorted Mother's face. She screamed, "You ungrateful child! After everything I did for you!" and suddenly rushed toward my bed. Wonder and Father, however, were faster. As medics raced in to bring order back to the mayhem, they restrained her. Father was clear about his choice that night. With a firm but sorrowful voice, he declared, "I'm going to file for divorce. I'm really sorry, Moran. I ought to have noticed this." A restraining order was granted once the police started their investigation. Mother continued to send resentful texts after moving in with family. One said, "I will never forgive you. My life was wrecked by you." But Tara ended up being my best friend. She promised to help me and came to my hospital room every day. "This time," she stated in a determined tone, "I will support you." Warner had similarly affectionate parents. Every time I visited, my mother-in-law brought homemade soup. The void left by my own mother was filled by her kind comments. She said, "You're a precious daughter." My doctor touched my stomach tenderly on the day I was released from the hospital. "The infant is doing well. He gave me his word. They will mature well." Tara and Father walked alongside us as Warner pushed my wheelchair outside. We were drenched in the gentle spring sunlight, and I experienced the warmth of actual family for the first time. Prior to assisting me get into the vehicle, my father gave me a firm hug. "From now on," he stated in an emotionally charged voice, "let's act like parents and children." I gave a nod. I'm crying uncontrollably. My life's long winter was done. The season had changed. Moran heard the doctor's voice in the birthing room. Another shove. I exerted every last bit of my strength. The sound of water, constant support in my ear. "You're capable." Tara massaged my back while sobbing quietly. Then the room was filled with a robust, powerful cry. "It's a female." As she gave her to me, the nurse held up the little bundle to make the announcement. I gazed at her little clenched hands and angry face. My vision is blurred by tears. I uttered the name Warner, and I had decided on Nikki. In the waiting area, Father was the first to see her. He remarked, "She looks exactly like you did when you were born," with tears in his eyes. It had been 3 months since that day. Mother's voice, now resentful, was her final communication. "You will never be forgiven by me. I've lost everything because of you." She moved out of state, I subsequently learned. I sometimes think about her late at night, with melancholy instead of rage. It's a woman who got lost, who become incapable of love. "Moran!" I was startled out of my reverie by Tara's words. "I believe Nikki is conscious. Feeding time has arrived." Nikki was presented to me by Tara. She moved into a neighboring apartment and comes by virtually every day. Her soft grin was reassuring. She replied, looking down at the infant, "Nikki has her eyes." Nikki's bright smile was all that was visible, even though her brown eyes mirrored mine. To spend more time with Nikki, Warner's father just took an early retirement. He said, "I want to see my granddaughter grow up." He comes every weekend and holds her for hours. He talked to me one day with an unusual level of gravity. "You've done so well, Moran," he added. "You've developed into an amazing mother." For decades, his words served as a salve for the scars I bear. Being a parent is difficult. Our days are filled with restless nights, ongoing concerns, and never-ending changes. But love is all around me. My rock is Tara, always willing to assist. Nikki is treated by Warner's parents as if she were their own granddaughter, giving her a lot of love and knitting her clothing. A support group for moms with complex family histories is something I've begun going to. It has been healing for me to share my experience on Nikki's 6th birthday. We celebrated a little. As the son leaned in and whispered, "Are you happy?" Father Tara Warner's parents and close friends filled the room with love and laughter. I grinned as I saw Nikki's serene face. I made a quiet pledge to love her without conditions and to protect her from the darkness I had experienced, as if he could read my mind. I was reassured by Nikki's touch as she extended her little hand. Here's where our true story starts. A bright future was promised as the spring air outside softly moved the trees.